What is the sickest burn you have seen a teacher give to a student? So I had a friend in high school who wore khaki pants and a collared shirt to school pretty much every day. One day he was leaning over some kid's desk helping him with something and his butt sticking way out, just tempting someone to run over and smack it. And another friend, James, does just that. He runs over and lands a perfect, incredibly loud slap square on the butt cheeks. On him, that made him bolt to standing up immediately. Fortunately for everyone else in the class except for James, it wasn't my friend but the teacher who also wore khakis and collared shirts to school every day. Everyone goes silent, and the teacher turns around, bright red but with a big smile on his face and says, "James, save that for after class." Everyone bursts out laughing, and the kid, of course, never lived it down. Story 2. There was this ginger kid in my high school who used to share a few classes with, who was basically the class a-hole. He used to give lip to the teachers and other students equally, so apart from his little crew of mates, he was pretty much universally disliked. Anyway, one class he was winding up my business studies teacher, a gentleman who was follically challenged and had a rather shiny bald head. After several minutes of this kid being a jerk and making comments about his head, we can see the teacher's patience slowly dwindling. He finally snaps when the kid shouts across the room to try and get the teacher's attention, "Oi, slaphead!" At which point he swings around and just screams, "Get your ginger pubes out of my effing classroom!" Story 3. Engineering Architectural CAD class in high school. We were allowed to listen to our iPods while working on assignments, but we were supposed to put them away whenever there was a lecture or instructions being given. Our teacher, we'll call him N, had speakers that he listened to his music with so he could still be attentive to the class. One student, we'll call him K, perpetually kept his headphones in, even during lectures and instructions, and thus missed a lot of information, and continued to ask questions that were explained 15 minutes beforehand. One day Mr. N was giving his instructions for the day, and noticed that K was blasting some rap through his headphones and screwing around on his computer. He stops everything, and has us all just wait, until K realizes that we're all waiting on him. Once he noticed, he took his headphones out, and Mr. N asked why he constantly keeps his headphones in. K replies, "I can't stand the country music you listen to. It's all just about stupid crap like trucks and girls and beer." Mr. N, being the professional he is, ignored the comment, finished the lecture, and sent us back to work, with the note that no one was allowed to listen to their iPods for the rest of the class. He then proceeds to go back to his computer and cranks the music he's listening to. Every time the song mentions trucks, girls, or beer, he screams over the music at Kay, saying something like, "Yeah, they're talking about their trucks and how muddy they are because of those back dirt roads." We were all giggling at the faces Kay was making and how hard he was trying to tune everything out. Maybe kinda immature, but it was kinda hilarious nonetheless. It's kind of awesome. Toby Keith also would have been a good choice. "I said, how do you like me now?" Story 4. We had this teacher that was like a cooler Gilbert Gottfried, Clyde Dexter Shaybaker. He was notorious for hilarious comments to students and not giving a crap about the most academic rules. This was an all-boys high school, so it was pretty much no holds barred. You know that grade confidentiality stuff? He doesn't. "Bummerito! Looks like you bombed another one. 62. Acceptable reading material? Nope. We read The Rule of the Bone." It's basically Catcher in the Rye, except with way more drugs and intimacy and breaking and entering. He started to tear up when reading the final passage of the book, like it was a memoir of his life, which it probably was, where the main character proceeds to get high as F on a boat off the coast of Jamaica. But by far my favorite was his retort to this overtly self-entitled rich douchebag in my class, who just so happened to have a big head, both figuratively and literally. "Mullen, quit effing talking in my class. I swear you look like the bottom head of a totem pole. Look at everyone else. Are they talking? Jeez! You could be the poster boy for birth control pills. If you don't want one of these, take these." Edit. Same kid, Mullen, different class. This teacher was known for his quite aggressive teaching. He would pace between the rows of desks, swinging what he called the Liberty Stick, which was a 2-inch thick, 3-foot long bar of oak. When he'd ask you a question, he'd swing the stick in your direction, sliding through his palm, and would catch it when it was about an inch from your nose. Also, if you fell asleep in his class with your head on the desk, he'd smack the bottom of your desk with the stick. It would hurt, and Mullen's time with the guy was priceless. "Hey, Mullen, why aren't you taking notes?" "I'm just gonna read the book." "Oh yeah, where's your book then?" "It's at home." "At home, huh? Oh crap. Guess I'm wasting your time then. Since you've got this all figured out, why don't you go study on your own time? You can leave. We'll see you for December 7th? Midterms? Wait, what? Get out of my classroom. I said I'll see you on the 7th. The kid tried to switch to another class, but after the story of how this went down got around, the school wouldn't let him switch. Man, I loved private school and their own rules. Freaking hated that kid. Story 5. So we had a teacher in 7th grade who was known for being very monotone, strict, boring, etc. She really wasn't the type to interact with 12 and 13-year-old kids in a way they could relate to. Looking back, I feel like she might have made a better high school teacher. We'll call her Mrs. Strict. One day, some kid was making a chicken joke, pretending to brush his teeth, and Mrs. Strict told him to get out of the classroom immediately. With cunning juvenile wit, the kid replies, "Your mom!" Without skipping a beat, Mrs. Strict replies in an elevated tone of voice, but still monotone, "Excuse me, young man, your mom." The classroom roared in a series of "Whoa!" as the kid hangs his head in shame and walks out the door. Thanks for being awesome, Mrs. Strict, even if your students don't appreciate it in the moment. Story 6. I was sitting in study hall with him when our economics teacher came in and sat down at our table. He was very serious and grabbed my friend's shoulder and said, "I'm sorry you needed a 75 to pass, and you got a 74. There's nothing I can do about it." My friend sat there in shock and asked the teacher if he was serious, said his parents were going to kill him and what he could do to try and pass the class to graduate. He even started hyperventilating and crying a little bit. After a little while, the teacher stood up and told him, "I was just kidding. You passed it by 1 point. My friend, once he got over the shock, became angry at the teacher and asked him why he would want to get him so upset. The teacher said, "I dedicated my life to teaching and wanted you to experience just a taste of the frustration I feel every night trying to teach kids who don't want to learn." Then he walked out of the room, and we just sat there in silence. Story 7. Don't bully a teacher. This will certainly be buried, and bear with me on the length, but when I was in the 8th grade, I had a really nice but socially awkward algebra teacher. Think tall, skinny, middle-aged woman constantly covered in dog hair with a toothy smile and a prevalent lisp. The entire school year she was tormented by a student I'll just call Billy, who was also known for bullying just about any kid he was bigger than. Anyways, Billy would do things like trip her, act out, call her names just about every class. Our teacher would try every tactic possible to address his behavior and was way too patient with how poorly behaved he was. Anyways, the entire school year where I lived was focused on passing the standards of learning test at the end of the year. During Billy's moments, our teacher would constantly warn him that if he didn't pay attention, he'd fail this test, and each time, Billy would respond by calling her a female dog or anything else he felt like calling her. Well, at the end of the year, a few weeks after we took our standards of learning exam, she announced she had all of our scores back. The following is what happened next. Teacher: "I have news. I got your standards of learning scores back." Billy: "Who cares?" Teacher: "And everyone passed." Students erupt into cheering. We were promised a cake if we all passed. Cheering slowly subsides. Teacher: "Except for Billy. Billy, you did not pass, and I'm so sorry," said with a sneaky grin. In retrospect, humiliating Billy was probably not the best thing to do, but he was pretty well behaved the last few weeks of school. 99.9% sure the burn had something to do with it. Serves him right. Also, I had a bit of a lisp when I was younger, and I gotta be careful reading these or I tend to slip back into it. Story 8. I had the perfect story for this question, but I know it will be buried. I guess I'll share it anyway. So my 7th grade math teacher was awesome. He had a huge, booming voice which you could hear 4 halls down. He had taught us fractions while cracking jokes about numbers being top-heavy. He had a weekly test on golden paper that he called the golden rod, which he would whip out of his pants in front of the class. He carried a giant ruler around all the time that he would slap on the desk for anyone dozing off. He was just the best. Anyway, there was a kid in the class who was kind of obnoxious, but he was also really good at math. He would let everyone know it most of the time. So he's sitting in the back corner of the class, just goofing around. My teacher was at the front of the chalkboard and noticed him not paying attention. On the next question, he asked the kid in the back directly what the answer was. He answered, 10 billion, or some other stupid number that had nothing to do with what we were studying. My teacher asked him if he thought that was really the answer. He said no. He then asked him why he gave that stupid answer instead. He said, 'cause I felt like it. So my teacher asked him to stand up. He did. Then he calmly reached down, rubbed the chalk eraser into some chalk dust at the bottom of the board, and then chucked it right into the kid's face. There was an explosion of dust, and the kid started gagging and crying. He was covered in dust, and there was an outline of an eraser on his forehead. Before the kid could respond, my teacher calmly asked him, "Do you know why I did that?" The kid chalked out a "No," my teacher shouted in that huge booming voice, "'cause I felt like it." He was one of my favorite teachers, and that was one of my favorite moments from school. Story 9. Disclaimer, I am the teacher. TA, actually, in this situation, so I'm hardly objective. Not exactly a rumor. Actually, it was apparently, but I didn't know at the time. Whatever, let me just tell the story and you'll get it. So, I'm a little tipsy and this might get wordy. I don't apologize unless it's boring, in which case I apologize. In high school, I was a geek of many types. Computer band and drama, all my favorite activities. My senior year, I'd been doing drama for 4 years. So I offered to TA the freshman drama class with my spare period. Seniors got a spare period if they had enough credits otherwise. It was, all told, pretty fun. Made me realize that even if I was not nearly as responsible as many of my same-year peers, I sure as crap had my head screwed on tighter than I did as a freshman. Generally, what I did as a drama TA was manage the freshmen while the teacher was off pulling up plays, doing research, whatnot. The teacher was quite aware that freshman year drama might attract people looking for easy A's and or people who had no actual acting talent whatsoever. So while the class wasn't super easy, she did set the minimum bar pretty low for what you had to do in order to pass the class. What I'm trying to say is that for the older kids who just didn't have the talent or the interest, literally all we asked of them for a given play was to memorize at most 10 short lines and repeat them on cue. Emotion optional. So it's near the end of the year, and we're rehearsing one of the final, maybe the final, can't remember, performances for the freshman drama class. Generally, the class manages itself, and I'm mostly there as the guy who has the script and will remind you what your line is. I say mostly because there are still the bad eggs, like you get in every class. In this case, out of the class of 30, there are 3 students who not only give no Fs, perfectly acceptable, they are offended that they are being required to even show up, much less put any effort towards the class. One of these students was a particular problem for me. I literally cannot remember her name, but she was the ex-girlfriend of an underclassman football player who decided to give drama a shot during his junior year. He took drama and liked it. She tried to follow him, but in the process of taking a drama class, he hung out around enough functional human beings to realize she was a horrible one and broke up with her. Thus, by the time the end of the year rolled around, she had zero interest in actually completing the class and was mightily offended that she was being required to, speak 3 or 4 times during the 1-hour performance that we had planned. She was already a morose enough person as it was. This was the late 90s, and she was heavy into the drug chick look. But after Everett, the football player, broke up with her, she became massively bitter atop depression. Just what a first-time TA needs to deal with. Yay! Ugh. So that all in mind, it's early afternoon. I'm overseeing yet another rehearsal of this performance, and we're at a scene where Shallow McBicker, the aforementioned problem student, is supposed to be present in the background, not speaking, along with the 2 other problem students. I'm running the other freshmen through lines, and the whole gosh dang time McBicker is chattering with her fellow low-interest students. Now, to be clear, I didn't have a problem with people talking with each other so long as it didn't interfere with rehearsals. This was not that. Their chats were becoming disruptive, loud enough to make it hard to hear any lines. The scene's nearly over though, so I just let it slide. That is, until it gets to the single line that McBicker and her two friends are supposed to deliver in unison. The cue comes, and they miss it. Okay, not a problem, hardly unexpected. I feed them all the line, and they flub it. I give it again, all 7 words of it. Only one completes it successfully. I give it again. McBicker kind of waffles and sits down without actually saying it. Yeah, no, that's not cool. I say the line again, and McBicker says, whatever, then pointedly ignores me, going back to the conversation with her other slacker friends, and that's when it happens. Now, you remember how I said she was into the drug chick look? Dark makeup under her eyes, kind of grungy, revealing clothing, very pale skin. She also had a habit of sitting with her arms crossed, almost as if she was cold or shivering. Perfect, almost junky look. In other words, which is what prompted me to say in my nastiest voice, look, you can come down off your drugs on your own time, but right now, we're running lines, so stand up and say your gosh dang line. Suddenly, everyone in the class does that thing you usually only hear on Jerry Springer and the like, that ooh noise, which roughly translates to, oh no, you didn't just say that. At this point, I'm confused. I mean, it was a bit of a biting comment, but I didn't think it was that much of a dig. There's this awkward silence for a few seconds. Then McBicker gets up and half-heartedly says her line. Well, no, she kind of screws it up still, but it has all the words, even if they're in the wrong order, so I let it slide and move on. Still, the class reaction bothers me. The next week I'm in class and Everett happens to be there. I sort of say hi to him when he unexpectedly brings up the incident with McBicker. I'm confused. I mean, I thought he broke up with her, so why would he care? Well, it turns out there's a reason. As it happens, one of the reasons he broke up with her was because she was an actual gosh dang drug addict. Yeah, seriously, she was 15 and already had a drug addiction. That drug chick look, not actually a look, just the result of a vaguely competent high school girl trying to look attractive while going through withdrawals during school every day. Anyway, Everett goes on to tell me that my comment kind of scared the crap out of her. She thought she'd been managing, thought she'd hidden her addiction reasonably well. She figured a few people in her class would catch wise, but the fact that I noticed, I had a reputation of being somewhat oblivious, put the fear of God into her, resulting in a panicked and half-intelligible call to poor Everett. Now, beyond that, I'm not sure what happened with her. She didn't drop out of school or anything, nor did she suddenly seem less angsty and whiny. She did show up for the performance and did deliver her line, woodenly, but beyond that, I couldn't tell you if she was actually clean or not. The only thing I can say for certain is that for the rest of the year, I had a reputation with the underclassmen as a friendly, happy-go-lucky guy who would utterly and completely destroy you and your sense of self-worth if you pushed him too far. I did little to dispel that reputation. Story 10. Back in boarding school, I was very close with this dude called Raj. Name changed. What do I say about Raj? There is so much to tell. First of all, Raj was a heavy stoner, the kind that endlessly plays Dota all night after blazing a few joints at the stroke of dusk. He would have a few rounds of intimacy throughout the night with his girlfriend when she woke up, but mostly rush through the act with one eye glued to his laptop. Then when dawn struck, he would make his way out to the base of a hill and sip Imperial Blue whiskey out of his South Sudanese roommate's red Manchester's United thermos with a gold flake cigarette, probably that he stole from me, in his hand a couple of minutes before his class to perk himself up. He would proceed to enter the academic quadrangle stinking of intimate relations, cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, and sweat from not having showered in weeks. At least when he bothered to show up for class anyway. This was back in high school, by the way. So picture a seedy 15-year-old adolescent boy behaving like an alcoholic hobo in an expensive private school, and now you get the picture. Anyway, all of that to say, Raj had made a habit of not showing up for English literature class. Our teacher, let's call him Ryan, was a big-hearted, red-headed, beefy American who had a knack for making everyone howl with laughter at anything he said. He thrived at getting us kids giggling at 7:30 a.m. when we were all bleary-eyed and foul-breathed. He lived for this challenge and loved sharing his infinite pool of energy with all of us cynical idiot teenagers. Ryan also had a habit of making very inappropriate jokes. But hey, we loved him all the more for it. One day the school organizes an open day for parents to visit. To the shock of everybody from the principal to the cleaning lady to probably himself, Raj volunteered to show the parents around. So we are at English class, at the ungodly hour of 8, when Ryan asks the class, as he always did, "Hey, where's Raj?" Usually I'd say that he was sick and or sleeping in, and Ryan would wave away the obvious excuse to customary chortles. But this time, I had the pleasure of informing Ryan that Raj was in fact showing parents around the campus. Ryan nearly fell off his seat, but maintained his cool. Raj walked into class a couple of minutes later, hair disheveled, a thoroughly confused look on his face. Ryan says, "Hey Raj, aren't you showing the parents around?" And Raj goes, "Oh yeah, I am supposed to do that," and looks out the window to see an exceedingly hot mother walking up to the front desk. His pupils instantly dilate, and Ryan latches on in a flash. "Go ahead, Raj. Go for the mom. Go for her. Take her back to your room." Laughter ensues. "Do you want to see my video games, Mom? Do you want to see all my joysticks? Oh, yeah." And he snapped his fingers with the most innocent joy and gleeful smile I've ever seen on any human being's face. Ryan was in splits with himself, and everyone had tears in their eyes. Raj slunk out of the room quietly, extremely embarrassed. But here's the best part. What Raj did not realize, and Ryan did, was that there was a condom stuck to his jean pocket. He walked around with it all day, and all the mothers did not approve. Story 11. Okay, so let me set the scene. It's drama class, my second to last year of high school. The class is gathered to draw out of a hat who has to perform their solo piece first. This piece was worth quite a few credits, and as is the case with drama students, hardly anyone was ready to perform. So the incredibly hot British teacher's assistant is helping out, one of those OE people that ends up working at a high school because they apparently hadn't gotten sick of this crap from their own school years, and he pulls out the first name. It's one of my best friends. He's cool with it. He's a chill guy and has his crap sorted. The number one female dog in the class immediately cracks up laughing and proceeds to rip into him for being first. My friend genuinely couldn't give a crap. As this is happening, the second name is pulled out. It's Miss Stank-a-Lot. She immediately starts whining about being second, throwing a huge gosh dang female dog fit. She looks at the hot teacher's assistant and says, "Do you want me to cry? Because I will cry." And this gorgeous, effing brilliant bloke immediately comes back with, "Well, it would be the first bit of decent acting you've done all year." It was immediate, it was stone cold, and it was glorious. Us drama kids have seen some funny crap, but I have never seen a mind-breaking piece of gold like that since that day. Story 12. Sorry I got to this so late. I know it's going to be completely buried. Not that it's necessarily funny to anyone else anyway, but I just hate showing up late to the party. So in my high school, there was a kid who was allegedly caught self-massaging thyself in class. No one really knew if it was true or not, but the rumors followed this student mercilessly. We'll call him Jim. I had at least one class with Jim, a foreign language class. One day the intercom opens up and it's the front office, and the secretary's voice comes over the speaker. "Is Jim available to come to the office?" Without missing a beat, the teacher in the room replied back for all to hear, "Sorry, his hands are full right now." The class explodes. For any of you who wonder if this was an accidental choice of words, this teacher was known for clowning with students, and she barely finished the line before she cracked up with the rest of us. It was possibly the darkest moment in Jim's childhood, but for the rest of us, it was freaking glorious. Story 13. Oh man, my second semester at a university, my English 102 professor was a take no crap kind of guy. He was the best professor I ever had. He was very blunt, always backed up his own opinions, but was open to hear others. There was never a moment of, "You're wrong because I'm right." Class was often discussions on current event topics, with a focus on speaking to groups and forming ideas and opinions. One day the topic was on gay marriage. There was some headline about it, I can't remember what. Someone was denied the option to adopt children because they were gay. And we were all discussing it and everyone had reasonable opinions. Most were saying that gay couples should be allowed to adopt children. Then we got to this one girl. Without even explaining her reasons, she said, "No, they shouldn't have kids. If they can't make it themselves, they shouldn't have one." This professor was willing to hear her argument for it, but that's all she had. So he closed his book, and we all waited for what was coming next. Even the girl was wincing because she knew she effed up. He asked her, "Do you like brownies?" She was hesitant to respond, and he asked, "Are you afraid of what I'm going to do with your answers?" Her only reply was, "No, I'm just not sure where you're going with this." "Well, do you like brownies?" he asked again. "No," the girl snapped back, thinking she would dodge the question of her opinions, but he pressed, "You dislike brownies. Okay, what kind of food do you like? Do you like Snickers bars?" The girl couldn't deny this, as she was eating one before class. I'm sure the good professor noticed. "Sure," the girl sarcastically replied. "Do you know how to effing make a Snickers bar?" asked the professor. The girl had a look of shock on her face, not knowing if she had anything for this. No, she said with reluctance. "Then you're not allowed to have a Snickers bar anymore. I'm terribly sorry." With that, the professor may as well have dropped the mic and left. That girl never came back to class. I recorded all of my classes and uploaded this brief conversation to my YouTube channel, unlisted. I just listened back to it for a good laugh. I'd post it here, but I don't want the teacher to be found out. His brother is someone relatively famous. Story 14. I went to a crazy high school, so let's see. One time my chem teacher ripped the pages out of this girl's laboratory notebook and said, "Rachel, I wouldn't even wipe my butt with this." Another time, this kid Eddie told our teacher, "Mr. P, you don't have any friends." Mr. P didn't say a word, he just continued on with his lesson. At the end of the year, we had to take state exams, which had reference tables. Mr. P walked over to Eddie's desk and handed him a reference table written in Korean. He said, "Eddie, I have friends in the state exam office." In history class, one year, these two kids in the back were being giant a-holes and disrupting the whole lesson. Our teacher was an ex-Marine and kept his patience pretty well, but finally he said, "If you don't be quiet, I'm really going to lose it." They kept talking, and so he walked over to a sink that happened to be near their desks. It was an old science classroom. He ripped out the U-bend faucet part with his bare hands and just looked at them. Needless to say, they shut up. I have more stories, by the way. I went to a crazy school. Story 15. My math teacher sophomore year, dude was effing brutal. Gave zero craps. He was saying people's test grades aloud instead of handing them back one by one because he was lazy. If you didn't want yours said out loud, you just go get the paper when he calls your name. When he calls my name, I let him say it out loud. I got a 65 or some crap, failing the test. First one called out that failed. I didn't care, it's just school. Well, some little smart female dog giggles when she hears that. And by smart, I mean she makes 100s on everything. And does all the extra credit, all that crap. She goes overkill on every assignment. All out. If she gets a 98, she makes the teacher explain in detail why she lost those 2 points. Well, this upset my teacher. He slammed the papers down and said, "You know what, Andrea? You want to know what you made? Huh? A 90. That's a B." She instantly started crying and ran out of the room. As soon as she left, he said, "I'm so sick of her smart crap." And he kept calling out grades. Story 16. So there were these two kids in my class, L and C. L and C really annoyed Mr. S very much, but Mr. S was a very laid-back guy. L and C kept being disruptive, being dinguses. Mr. S ended his lecture a bit early and pulled up a YouTube video on his screen. He asked the class, "So you guys have the senior prom this year, correct?" "Oh yeah, Mr. S, it's gonna be awesome." "Ah yes, I have a recommendation for L and C over here." With a stone face, he swiped a video from his monitor to the projector. It was the scene from Dumb and Dumber. When Harry and Lloyd enter the dinner in bright blue and orange suits, L and C were just so blown away, and we all kept calling them Harry and Lloyd for the rest of the month. It was hilarious. I kept trying to drop Dumb and Dumber references too. Same class group but different classroom and teacher. One kid, B, got upset at L and decided to finally break it down. He got up and yelled, "I'm effing sick of your crap, L!" And the whole class was quiet. I decided to break his silence with a, "Kick his butt, Seabass!" Aw man, I miss high school sometimes. I need to go watch Dumb and Dumber again now. Mock! Yeah! Yeah! Story 17. So I went back to my high school to do IT work for my college internship. It was over the summer, but started right at the end of the school year, so I had a few weeks with the kids. One day I was fixing a printer in a class where the kids were arguing with the teacher. The argument was about how much better the rapper was than the teacher. Essentially just the kids ragging on the teacher with him not responding because he legally couldn't. It was aggravating me. Eventually, the onslaught of the teacher ended with a student saying, Biggie was a huge star. He had money, women, and power. He wasn't a nothing working for garbage money in a public school. What do you have that he doesn't? There was a second of silence, like everyone knew that was too far. I turned around and said, he's got a beating heart. Let me know how Biggie's doing with fortune and women now, kiddo. It wasn't the best comeback, but everyone laughed and awkwardly clapped. The kid shut up quick, so I feel like I did my job. Full disclosure, I like Biggie. I just hated that little effer. Story 18. Not a burn, but a prank. It was in high school in my overachiever days when I was in a play. Tech week. Heck week. Every practice for swimming and heavy course load mixed with awful sleeping habits, I tried taking notes with my head leaning on my arm. Which leads to one thing, math nap. My teacher noticed, got the entire class in on it. So he shuffled the students out, changed the clock on the wall hours later and turned off the light. As he left the room, closed the door just loudly enough to wake me up to an empty classroom. Lights out and apparently after the school had let out. I freaked out, cursed many times loudly like I was late to everything, gathered my things in a panic and ran out of the hallway greeted by the best group of laughter I have ever experienced. Well, effing played, good sir. Story 19. Last semester, we were having our weekly lecture on intercultural management at a university in Germany. The professor gave an example of a controversial case that happened at a toy store in French Canada. He was giving some details when a blonde girl in the last row raised her hand and said something like, Well, I'm French Canada, and you're not well enough informed to discuss a case that is not yet solved, and yada 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 yada. In short, she was kind of being an idiot to the professor. He let that one slide. If we got one thing about our professor, it's that he was a true globetrotter and had a lot of stories from his day. Later, when he was giving one of his stories from his army days, he was mentioning about how the guys went out in the evenings to find hookers and made a point to emphasize about them. He said, You know where the cheapest hookers were from? He paused. French Canada. I could smell the smoke from the front row. Story 20. My high school biology teacher, let's call him Mike, wasn't a great teacher. He was a brilliant guy, but he had no teaching skills and he couldn't keep order in the classroom. There was one student in particular that gave him crap every day for the entire year. Let's call that student Bo. Bo wasn't very bright. He coasted through most of his classes because I grew up in the Midwest and he was captain of the football team. But Mike didn't give a crap about football. Since Mike wouldn't give Bo passing grades like most teachers did, he was flunking the class, and he had to get an A on the final to pass the class. So he snuck into Mike's room during lunch and copied the answer key to the test. The last day of class, Mike is handing out the final grades, and he saves Bo for last. Out loud in front of the class, he says, And the lowest grade in the class, a 14%, goes to Bo. Bo, having cheated and expecting a perfect score, was shocked. Mike then went on to explain that he knew Bo had tried to cheat, but Bo had stolen the answer sheet to the wrong test. So Mike gave Bo a choice, either take the 14% and flunk the class, or admit he cheated and probably get kicked off the football team. The entire class was laughing at this poor, dumb idiot. None of us liked Mike all that much, but that moment really redeemed him in our eyes. Story 21. This is reversed from what was asked, but the substitute teacher. If you have questions about the assignment, you can ask me. Student close to me. Hey, can you help me real quick with this? This wasn't meant as a dig to the sub. I was just good at the assignment. Me? Sure. Sub. Oh, what? You think that you could help them better than I could? Do you think you're smarter than me? He says this all in a very condescending manner. Me? Well, I would like to think I'm smart enough to not become a substitute teacher. The whole class laughs. Sub. Well, you are quite the little P word, aren't you? Tells me to stay late, and after class he tells me that the P word means chicken. After that, I wasn't allowed to be in the same class as that sub. Too long didn't read. In the 8th grade, a sub was very condescending to me. So he asked if I thought I was smarter than him. To which I said, I'd like to think I'm smart enough to not be a substitute teacher. To which he called me a chicken. Story 22. My school was known for being terrible to substitutes, so much so many quit before the day was over. Anyway, our notoriety had spread, so most of the time when a teacher was sick, we would go to another class, and more than likely be a nuisance to the teacher stuck with us. One day my first period teacher was absent, but this time there was no note on the door to tell us which class to go to. This could only mean one thing: some poor soul is subbing. A man walked in our class. He was tall and muscular, looked like he could bend a steel beam just by looking at it. He had a long beard and was wearing a business casual attire that showed off some bad mamma jamma tattoos. Us being the idiot high schoolers we were, though, we could make him break. But boy, were we wrong. One student tried to pull a fast one and yells out, "I smell fresh meat!" Now keep in mind, almost everyone in the district knew our reputation with subs, so this guy knew what we were about. The sub puts down his bag and walks towards the kid. He walks up to him, leans over his desk, and takes a big whiff. He breathes out and says, "Really? All I smell is your cat." Everyone broke out in gasps. The sub walks back to the front of the class and yells out, "Any of you other little craps want to make a comment?" No one said anything. We were so taken aback by his comment. "All right then, let's learn some effing history." Mr. David became a legend at our school for being the only sub we couldn't break, and we loved him. Turns out Mr. David was a Navy SEAL who always wanted to teach, and our school was the only place that needed subs, so he took the challenge. To this day, there's a photo of Mr. David in my class's yearbook. Have no idea if he kept teaching, but definitely was added to our school's legends. My personal favorite was Edward Kelly. That dude defined the word legend. Story 23. We were in class with a substitute teacher watching a movie, and I was sitting at the back with a group of friends shooting the crap after. I was eating some Skittles, and my friend asked if he could have one. I said, "Go get your own," etc. You know, whatever. So I accidentally dropped one on the floor, but it was orange, so I wasn't that mad. A few minutes later, I guess one of my other friends saw the original friend who had asked for a Skittle pick it up off the floor, pretending to tie his shoe. Sneakishly look around, then pretend he was scratching his face, and he ate the effing Skittle. Kid must have been seriously craving Skittles to eat an orange one, and off the floor. The one friend calls him out for it, and the other friend denies it out the butt while turning redder than all heck. We're all laughing and crap, and the teacher comes over and asks what we're laughing about. We tell her what he did, and she gets the grossest look on her face. She looked right at my friend and said, "I have 4 sons. They have done some nasty crap in their life, but nothing they've done even comes close to that." We all laughed at him a lot more. That was 8 years ago, and to this day, he still denies eating that dang Skittle. Wait, what's wrong with the orange Skittle? Am I crazy? I always thought yellow was the hated one. Everybody drop your most hated Skittle down below. Story 24. My mother, a teacher, wrote a kid's name on the board to keep track of punishments and such, and he snapped, "You spelled my name wrong!" Keep in mind that this was a name that is spoken ordinarily, but is spelled super weird. So my mother says, "No, son, your mother spelled it wrong." She had to apologize to him in front of the entire school after the kid's mom got mad. But apparently all the attention was even more embarrassing for the kid. At the same school, some kid on the sidewalk next to the outdoor area for recess, on the other side of a fence, spit acid into her face. That's a bad part of town. Story 25. In my junior year of high school, I had the coolest construction class. Woodshop. Anyways, on one particular day, my teacher called in sick. There was only one sub available as I lived in a small town, so the substitute teacher we got had zero idea what to teach in a construction class. We will call her Mrs. L. Now, Mrs. L was a elderly, heavy woman probably in her mid-60s. She's the kind of lady that cooks too much food for her grandkids. Anyways, when we got to attendance, she called out the name of a kid called Felix. Felix was one of those knucklehead seniors that loved to spite teachers. So when this sweet old lady called out his name, he didn't say, "Here." Felix promptly responded with, "Mrs. L, suck my chicken." Mrs. L casually responded without hesitation, "Felix, now that would be hard considering you don't have one." The whole class instantly erupted with laughter. Needless to say, no one let Felix live that one down for the perfect burn by Mrs. L. Story 26. 3 kids got sent out of their lesson into the classroom workshop next door where me and a couple of other guys were working on projects. Our teacher was annoyed at having to watch them during his free period, especially once they started mouthing off at everyone else in the room. The biggest kid says something along the lines of, "F this, I don't have to stay here, I'm leaving." The teacher replies, "You sit right back down." "F off, I'm out of here," the kid says, standing up. The teacher steps between him and the door and says with a little smile, "You'd have to get through me first." "Ooh," chorus of the 2 goons. "Nah, you wouldn't do nothing." "Sir, you're too chicken," the kid says, squaring up. The teacher scoffs, looks the kid up and down and says with a smirk, "Me? Chicken? I've seen more meat on a cheese sandwich." The other 2 go from laughing with this kid to laughing at him, and the wind is blown completely from his sails. I make eye contact with one of the other guys, and we can't keep it together and have to leave the classroom. Story 27. My 5th grade class was supposed to watch a movie on the projector, but the fan was super dusty, so the projector would only start up, overheat, and then shut off. So my teacher grabbed a can of highly pressurized air and took it and the fan outside to clean off the dust. Before I tell you this next part, you should know about Noah. The guy was pretty funny, but a nerdy kid. He was also the butt of every joke in the class, but he actually liked it that way. "Nice socks, Noah. Did your mom pick them out for you?" "Yes, actually. After I was done tucking your mom into bed, I was too tired to pick out my own clothes." Stuff like that. Even the teacher, we'll call him Mr. K, was in on it too. The 2 would have a lot of funny banter during class and actually made the slow elementary school days go by faster. Mr. K was done cleaning the fan outside. He had saw some vomit in the planter. So Mr. K walks in and says, "Wow, looks like somebody lost their lunch." Noah smiles and replies, "Yeah, they must have seen your face." Typical 5th grade insult, I know, but it still made all the class chuckle with laughter. Mr. K, not wanting to be one-upped by the class clown, leans in, takes a deep breath, allowing Noah to get a nice look at his face before he would scare the kid for life. Mr. K pulled on the back of Noah's collar and revealed the back of his neck. Mr. K then aimed his can and sprayed the back of Noah's neck down with an aerosol can. Everyone laughed, including Noah, and we carried on with the rest of the day. Turns out Mr. K had burned the back of Noah's neck with the can, and we all found out the next day when Noah came in with a giant dark spot on the back of his neck. He was really good-humored about it, though. Mr. K freaked out and apologized profusely and even took Noah and his family out to dinner to apologize for the situation. And before anyone asks, Mr. K was not fired. Noah didn't tell anyone outside the classroom and his parents that Mr. K had burned the back of his neck with an aerosol can, so no one got in trouble. And that's the time my teacher gave a sick burn to one of his students. Story 28. Freshman year of high school, world history, senior football star in a freshman class because he just wasn't bright. He sat in front of the hottest girl in school, also not so bright. The football star dropped out halfway through the year. A new student comes in, and the exchange between the teacher and the hottie is priceless. "Sit in any seat you want except that seat," points to football star's old SWAT in front of hot girl. "That's the death seat." "Hey, it's not like I was sucking the brains out of him." "I don't care what you were sucking out of him. Don't sit there." I could not stop laughing for like 2 days after that. Story 29. When I was in 4th grade, I remember my teacher listening to some weird music on the stereo. I mean some real goofy crap. People hollering, there was a piano and a guitar. 4th grade me just knew this was some bull crap. I started to make fun of her and the song with my friends, mostly just me. Well, she heard me and instantly calls me out. "Oh yeah? Well, tomorrow you have an assignment. You need to bring in some music that you like so we can all listen to it." Okay, no problem. I like all the popular music, Nirvana, STP, Soundgarden. Heck, maybe I could bring in my White Zombie and really knock their socks off. Then everyone would know how cool I was. A 4th grade boy's dream. Well, I accepted the assignment before I realized one very important detail. My super religious parents never allowed me to have any of that music on tape. I heard it on the radio and I'd listen to it at my dad's house or with friends, but I own zero good music. Crap. So I go home and I start looking. The only thing I can find that isn't Amy Grant or Huey Lewis in the News is this tape by a guy who I think his name was Chaz Rider. He was a trumpet player that did the church circuit. Handsome young dude who toured around and sold tapes to old ladies at church. Dude could kill it on a trumpet, no doubt. I saw him hold a note for like 30 seconds at his show and was blown away by it. I remember lying in bed at night trying to breathe out of my mouth while sucking in through my nose, trying to figure out how he did that. Great trumpet player, but not what I had in mind to bring to class. So I show up the next day with this stupid Chaz tape, pop it in, and as you can expect, the whole class, including the teacher, proceed to laugh at me while I try to convince them that I'm cool, dang it! I listen to cool music, I swear! To make the whole thing nice, I later learned what song the teacher had been playing for class. Pink Floyd, The Thin Ice. Gosh dang, 4th grade me. Story 30. We had an early morning recitation class. At the end, Professor S would end it with, I have no questions, you have no questions, let's go get coffee. And we would go get coffee at one of the campus eateries. This was senior year and we had Professor S for at least 3 or 4 classes by this point. He knew us well, we knew him well. I should also add that he had a daughter who was a student at the university who was our year. It was very near the end of the year. Grades were basically set and we were having coffee and laughing it up. I said, you know, Dr. S, I've been threatening to storm into your office, come right up to your desk, point you right in the face and say, okay, Mr. S, you either give me an A or I date your daughter. Without missing a beat, he takes a sip and says, and I would have given it to you. My lab partner spit his coffee across the table. Story 32. One of my best friends in high school and I had the same study hall period in the same room. We'd always get passes and go to the other rooms for tutoring and not show up and basically wander the school and make mischief during the study period. One time we were in his English teacher's room, prank calling our Spanish teacher while he was teaching a class, making fun of him for being bald in Spanish or something like that. The Spanish teacher had a love-hate relationship with us, in that he loved to hate us, but I think he secretly enjoyed us by the end of high school. He went to the same college as I did and we got drunk at a tailgate and made amends. He was yelling at us over the phone, cursing in Spanish in front of his class because he knew it was us. Anyway, the English teacher comes into the back of his room and he's like, what are you two doing in here? My friend hangs up the phone so he can't figure out who we were prank calling and promptly says, it smells like sadness in here. The teacher had gone through a divorce and was going through a midlife crisis as evidenced by his recently purchased 80s Ferrari. The teacher, with no less than a second pause, responded with, smells like idiot now that you're in here. Story 33. I know a guy that has this computer science teacher this year. The first thing the teacher says is this, so you all signed up for computer science. Well, let me tell you, this course is not for people here just to be here or people here just to have an AP. So expect that everyone knows their crap, and we are starting game programming tomorrow. Our IDE is Blue Jay. I will give you the rest of the period to yourselves. He then says that the first project will be Tetris and will be worth 200 points and due the next week. And then the next day, everyone has their computer ready and textbooks and crap, and he says, keep in mind that half the class is gone before the 200 points could affect them, and an E on their GPA. Well, good, I expected about this much, and you are all the best prepared or the most interested. I was kidding about that. This is a course that will span the basics to the most complicated areas, and I didn't want any laggards or people to do bad. So I made that all up. Good job, teacher. Good job. Story 34. Not really a burn, but more of a thug life moment. In grade 9, I had a pretty funny geography teacher who one day had to struggle with one student constantly reading a comic book in class. Don't know how he could prefer it, but to each his own. After telling the kid 3 times already to put the book away, just to see him reading it again 5 minutes later, he threatened that if he saw that book again, he'd throw it out the window. Everybody laughed at the idea, but we all knew it would never happen. Then the guy starts reading his book again. The teacher goes silent, student continues to read. After slowly walking to the desk in dead silence, he rips the comic book out of the student's hands, slowly brings it over to a window. He opens it, dangles it outside for a few seconds, and just as everybody's ready to call his bluff, he drops it. Outside the window was the roof of an attached building. I still don't know what ever happened to that book. Story 36. I know this will get buried, but I have 2 stories too good not to share. First one happened in 8th grade. We were all doing book reports, and throughout every one, this super obnoxious kid would constantly interrupt and make lame jokes. By the time he did his book report, I believe he was actually the last one to present. We were all pretty sick of it. As the teacher called him up, she starts writing big letters on a piece of paper. A couple seconds into his report, she held up a sign saying, "Everyone start talking." He was sitting in front of her facing the class so he didn't see. We were all a little confused but started conversing with each other. The kid presenting loudly complained to the teacher and she told us to settle down. Seconds after, she held up the sign again, and now that we had caught on, we talked even louder. When he complained again, she told us to stop talking and then turned to him and just said, "See how annoying it is when other people talk during your presentation?" Red-faced, he had to finish the book report with all of us snickering. Second one happened in grade 10. Drama. A guy thought it would be hilarious to put a chicken on his shirt with pink duct tape. My teacher sees this, sighed and said, "I have a teacher response to this and a personal response to this." We all told her to go with her personal response. She walks over, rips off the majority of the shaft, sticks some tape back on as the tip and says, "There, that's more accurate for you." Story 37. Every small town school has that one kid whose grandparents are really influential, but the kid's branch of the family are the black sheep. So the kid grows up trash, but bullies everyone because they think they have the same amount of clout as everyone else. That was Freddie. Well, one day in high school, we had a substitute teacher, Mr. Rancher, who had worked some pretty tough schools in the Southern California area before relocating, and the conversation turned to East LA. Freddie had been pulling his usual bullcrap when there was a sub, basically acting like he ran the classroom. Someone in class, "You taught in Los Angeles. What was it like?" Mr. Rancher, while rolling up his long shirt sleeve. "Well, this is what happens when you fail a student in East LA. He reveals a scar from wrist to elbow from defending against a knife slash. Class, "Whoa." Mr. Rancher, rolling his sleeve back down. "They also had this little thing they thought was clever. They'd call me sir, but really emphasized the sir when they said it. What they really meant was a-hole." Class, "OMG, he just said a-hole." Mr. Rancher, "Well, you all know now not to call me sir, so let's get to work." Freddie, "Yes, sir." Mr. Rancher, turning from the blackboard, "You know, Freddie, if a-holes were airplanes, you'd be a gosh dang 747. The class erupted in laughter. That was his last day at school. Mr. Rancher, that is. We all liked him too. Story 38. I had a math teacher in high school in France who was very dry-witted. There was this one test that the whole class, including the really good ones, failed. To give you some context, grades are over 20 in science-oriented programs. Getting 10 out of 20, the passing grade is considered okay. 12 out of 20 is not bad at all, and 14 out of 20 is up to really good. Obviously, 18 plus out of 20 is great. The grades for this test went from 0 out of 20 to 10 out of 20. The grades are bad. There are two kinds of students in this classroom. Those who understand the topic but didn't prepare for the test. These more or less managed. And those who didn't understand and didn't prepare at all. Those idiots. Even those who managed to get 10 out of 20 should be ashamed. The initial scale had 29 points, so you should have gotten 7.5 out of 20. As a result, I announced a second test on the same topic, same time, within the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, we take the test. 1 week after that, we get the results. Now this teacher called people by name to his desk and would give the grade aloud and maybe a comment. He announced the results. The grades were so bad I had to double them. Those whose grade is 0 got their grade doubled too. And then proceeded to call people by ascending grade 0, 0, 0, 1, 1. We're reaching the good grades. 2, 2. The best grade that day was a 7 out of 20. Or a 3.5 out of 20 initially. We almost all felt very, very dumb that day. Story 39. I remember once during an intro biology class in college, we were going over the female anatomy. It was an auditorium class that sat probably 300 people with a huge projector screen, and on the screen was a 20-foot-tall female cat. The professor was giving her lecture, and during a brief pause, what would have been perfect was a moment of silence filled with the shutter sound of someone's cell phone camera going off. The professor immediately snapped her head up and said, "Must be your first time seeing one. Go ahead, take a few more for later." She caused such an uproar that she wound up calling class a few minutes early because no one would settle back down. It was glorious. Story 40. I remember this quite vividly. Our grades during one term of AS level physics were particularly lousy, and the new teacher was understandably super upset. We were warned that we had to buck up and start working from the next set of work. Fast forward a week and the grades come back and there was a slight improvement overall. One particular girl, M, got an A, and teacher was so impressed he wanted to come up and read it. She gets all giddy, fat grin on her face, and proceeds to waltz to the front of class where she begins reading aloud. The teacher is brimming with pride as he goes to his computer and loads up something on the interactive whiteboard behind the girl. He takes his mouse and highlights as she is reading what she lifted word for word from Wikipedia. At this point, we are all in hysterics, causing M to become confused and upset, making us die even more. I reckon teacher had enough of this spectacle and laid into her, making her bawl her eyes out. Guy was really passive before this, was totally out of character. Ah, the days of plagiarizing. It's a thing of the past. Everybody uses AI now. Well, that's a whole other conversation. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me and listening to these stories of teachers absolutely burning their students. If you have any glorious roast from your days in the classroom, feel free to drop those down below and we will read those. And if not, just continue on having an awesome day. Again, thanks for hanging out with me and we will see you guys in the next one.